Nations, bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy. I hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you are processing what we just saw in the first Dallas Cowboys game of the season. Not Thursday night football from a branding standpoint. Technically Sunday night football. That's always a gripe that I have. Cowboys falling, whatever you want to call it, in Philadelphia to the Eagles, 24-20 on banner night, whatever. The Eagles of this all really doesn't bother me. Really didn't affect me. I think we're all kind of in the same, sort of space in that particular regard. The only way I feel, I feel any kind of emotion about it is that the Cowboys had a chance to steal a division game, steal a road division game. They were right there. And they're 0-1. They'll have to sit on that. I think there are a lot of positives here. I think that there are an enormous amount of positives, a lot more than I think any of us anticipated. I think that this game, it's really easy to get caught up. It's really easy to, because it was right there, because the Cowboys had so many opportunities to close the door, seemingly close the door. It's really easy to feel like we had it. It's really easy to feel like the Cowboys definitely had in their grasp and they let it go. But I would remind us to remember the things we talked about, the things we said to one another, perhaps the things you said in your own circles, whether to your friends, to your family, your coworkers, whatever. I think that we all mostly, I know some of you, may have picked the Cowboys to win, but speaking for myself, and I think that that's a lot of people, I picked the Cowboys to lose this game, but to cover. I thought the line was outrageous. I thought it was unbelievable that anybody thought the Cowboys were going to get blown out in this game. That just simply does not happen. And so in that sense, I feel like this team is exactly who I thought they were. And they maybe even improved who I thought they were in some respects and in some manners. They showed a lot of might. They showed a lot of spine. They showed a lot of gumption. They withered a little bit, certainly offensively over the second half. And I think we can certainly assign some of that to the weather delay, which is why a lot of us are here late. And I thank all of you who are here for the live show. We are streaming our Dallas Cowboys postgame shows live this year on both the Bleacher Report app and on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. If you're new around here, please like the video and subscribe. And if you want to hang out with me on social media, I'm RJ Ochoa most places. You can find the links to all my social profiles in the description down below. That being said, again, this kind of went chalk for how I thought. I didn't bet on this game. I live in the state of Texas, but if I had bet, I would have bet on the Cowboys to cover. And at no point even were they ever in jeopardy. I think in a technical sense, I suppose the Eagles had a 4-point lead and held the ball 3 different times. And so I suppose you could argue that at that point, the Eagles were going to go down and cover. I think we kind of anticipated after the second straight stop that the Cowboys defense had there down the stretch that was finally going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, and that Philadelphia was going to go down, do some sort of final tush push and win this game by 11 and have that backdoor cover. Shane Davis says on YouTube, I think they showed me they have potential to have a good season tonight, and I didn't feel that way last week. And I think that is ultimately the biggest change in disposition from people. And again, I anticipated, if you follow me, if you listen to me, that the Cowboys would win somewhere between 9 and 11 games this season. And again, I predicted this one to be a loss. So they're kind of right on track in that sense. But they definitely have more fight in them than I would have anticipated. And I think especially if we contextualize it with, the Micah trade having been just a week ago today, right? That's not to bring up the trade to talk about the trade, but the reality of it is that it was just a week ago. The broadcast obviously talked about it an enormous amount. S Master Flash on Bleacher Report says proud of the fight, but a wasted opportunity. And I think that's they were there, right? They had it. Again, I don't think this was ever anything that they technically lost because we predicted and anticipated them to lose this game. But I ultimately, they had a chance to steal it. And to be a contending team, you have to steal some games. Those are the differences between being 12-5 or 11-6 or 10-7. I think that point is pretty obvious. Topher, thank you for the super chat, says this feels like the 2022 season opener against the Bucs. We should have won that. We went on a run. Very similar vibes. Dak was locked in. We are back. Now, you might be mixing that with the 2021 season opener. That was the opener, the NFL opener, the season kickoff game in 2021. The Cowboys played very well, especially offensively in that game. Dak Prescott was phenomenal. They did lose. They also lost to the Bucs in the 2022 season opener, but that was Sunday Night Football, and that was the game that Dak Prescott hurt his thumb, and then he missed 5 games, and a lot of circumstances were different. So maybe it's somewhere in between those two things. I'm with you. I do kind of have that vibe. I think we all think this team is going to beat the New York Giants next Sunday, get to 500, and then it's a matter of how do they fare against Ben Johnson's Chicago Bears? How do they fare against the aforementioned Micah Parsons and the Green Bay Packers at the end of September? Ultimately, I think that this team is going to beat the teams they're supposed to, and they're going to have to steal some of these if they want to be a contending team. I think that's really obvious. As it relates to the game, Andy Reeves has snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I suppose, a take that is on fire. I see it on my tweet deck here that people have found a high level of disagreement with. I write a stock report every week for bloggingtheboys.com, and that's something that I'm changing the timing of this year. I'll be writing that the day after every single game, just to kind of allow a little bit more time for things to marinate. But in my early thoughts, I think stock up is certainly the entire defense. And it's hard to say that because they were obviously, playing quite poorly in the first half. And I think it's very fair to say that the weather delay impacted a lot of things, impacted not just the Cowboys, but the Eagles, right? The defenses kind of took over for both sides of this game after the weather delay, which was somewhat in the second half. It was kind of, 2/3 into the third quarter, but still, I think that it was notable in that sense. But from a stock up standpoint, Matt Eberflus is a massive stock up for me. I think that Marshawn Nealon, despite getting held the entire game by Lane Johnson, I think Donovan Ezuraku popped, Solomon Thomas, Kenny Clark, like all these defensive linemen. I'm not here to talk about the Micah Parsons trade, but to put it simply, I will never justify that. I will never feel like it made sense. I know some people feel that way and whatever, but what I will say is that the Cowboys absolutely unequivocally have a lot of pass rushers who can help. And so in a vacuum, they can sustain that particular loss. I still wouldn't have done the trade, just for the record and for it to reflect my opinion. But that being said, while those are my stock ups, I think the clear stock down, I've been writing stock report at Blogging the Boys for, I don't know, like 5-6 years now. And I don't know that I've ever had CeeDee Lamb be a stock down. He is clearly the leader of the stock down for me. I think you can make an argument, obviously, that the offensive line was a little bit of a stock down, but for me, offensively, the only real culprits I can kind of pinpoint, I think that Brian Schottenheimer was amazing. I think if there's a clear winner from this game, it's Brian Schottenheimer, not only the head coach, but Brian Schottenheimer, the offensive play caller, because we had no idea who this man was going to be as a play caller. And I know that the preseason gave us some indication and some data and some idea of what we were going to see from Brian, obviously. But it was difficult. And some of it was the Joe Milton of it all and how the Cowboys were managing, the cultivation of Milton as their backup quarterback and grooming him for the future and whatnot. But that being said, I thought Brian Schottenheimer was fantastic. And I think that he called an incredible game. I certainly can't wait to watch this over again and really kind of dive into what he did well. But obviously watching it, in real time and off the broadcast, I think that Brian Schottenheimer was amazing. Brian Schottenheimer, as an offensive play caller and as a head coach, put the team in a position to win. I think the head coach part of him did an amazing job managing the emotions of everything, and not just the trade, but the season opener, it being the Eagles, the fact that, this they are the Cowboys, and there's always a meme, there's always a joke, there's always somebody screaming about them. I think that Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach, did a great job of having the team prepared, and I think that was particularly evidenced by the way the defense came out of the delay. They came out, and Melissa Stark talked about this on the broadcast and kind of juiced and gassed up, and I think that the culture of who Brian Schottenheimer is starting to really take hold, and some of that tenacity, toughness. I think Maris Liufau maybe isn't a stock up as much as he is just like a volatile stock. Maris Liufau was like the hardest hitting player on the Cowboys throughout this game, and somebody who really seemed to take to heart what Brian Schottenheimer was discussing in terms of the disposition he wanted to see from his team. I see you L2K Hypnose 2 with the super chats. His NFC East mixtape song is What Hurts the Most. Shout out to Rascal Flats, obviously. But my other stock down, and when I tweeted it, I did not expect this firestorm that I'm getting in my mentions. But Dak Prescott, I thought, played an amazing game. In a general sense, I think that Dak Prescott was very clearly in his bag in 95% of this game's most important moments. And I think of that 95%, the moments in the final portion, the final few minutes, the final drive, certainly for the Cowboys, I do not put any of that on Dak Prescott. But what I will say is that this defense that we doubted, this defense that we disparaged, this defense that we said, oh, they're certainly not going to be able to be anything in the aftermath, in the wake of the Micah Parsons trade, this defense stood tall, not once, not twice, but 3 straight times in the second half with a 4-point deficit. They gave their ball, or, the ball, I should say, to Dak Prescott, to the offense. And again, CeeDee Lamb is the top level stock down for me. CeeDee Lamb had multiple critical drops. You certainly can't have that. You certainly expect a guy who you pay what you pay, CeeDee Lamb, to be able to deliver in those moments. That's why you pay him. Multiple things can be true here. I think that you have to say that because the offense fell short on 3 straight possessions, didn't even move the ball on the first 2 possessions. I mean, that has to fall on Dak Prescott on some level. And if you know me, I am a huge Dak Prescott supporter. You will not find someone who supports Dak Prescott more than I do. I have fought the good fight, and I will continue to fight the good fight. But I think we have responsibility to be objective. And while CeeDee Lamb, I think, was the primary culprit, I do think that Dak Prescott would probably, I haven't seen any of his post-game quotes, but I imagine that Dak Prescott will probably offer some level of, self-owning and whatnot. Not that he, isn't going to say anything else, but I think that Dak Prescott, while he delivered the ball to CeeDee Lamb in perfect moments, certainly down the stretch, again, multiple things can be true. I think that the offense stalling, again, there were 3 straight possessions in which the Cowboys needed 4 points. And it certainly should be said that Miles Sanders fumbled. I think he deserves a stock down. That was, if we have to isolate the catalyst of this game and what changed, and of course, it's ironic that happened right before the lightning delay. I think the biggest, if we do winners and losers, the biggest losers are certainly CeeDee Lamb and Miles Sanders in that regard. And I think we should mention that if not for, the whole game matters, but the defense was really kind of, in a bind in the first half and really kind of letting this team down. And so you could look around a number of ways and say this player was great, this player was bad, and be talking about one half or the other. And that's why I understand it might come across prickly to some people to say whatever about Dak Prescott, because Dak and CeeDee were the reason the Cowboys were in this game. And I think maybe at halftime, maybe at the weather delay, you, like myself, we all thought, man, the Cowboys are going to find a way to steal this game. That's what makes it so frustrating that they didn't. But the fact that they let it slip through their fingers is difficult to square, because the things that were going well for them prior to the delay, prior to halftime, just kind of fell asleep. It was really a Jekyll and Hyde, representation of 2 different parts of who the Cowboys were in this game. Let's see here. Shane Davis says on YouTube, I did expect more Pickens deep targets. I'm sure they'll get him the ball more soon. I don't really have a stock direction or a stock take on George Pickens. I think he made the plays that were required of him. He almost caught that pass one-handed that he drew that massive pass interference call on. I think that George Pickens was fine for the Cowboys. I think everything went well. I agree. I would love to see him incorporated more. I don't think that that's a negative. I'm not suggesting that anybody's suggesting this, but I don't think that's a negative on Pickens. I don't think that's a negative on Schottenheimer. I think that was just the way the game went. Offensively, though, I mean, again, the offensive line certainly had some issues, certainly had some trouble, but I think it's unfortunate. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do this, but if you have to put somebody on the poster for the offensive failures, it's definitely not Dak Prescott. I think he holds some blame and holds some responsibility and accountability, but it's CeeDee Lamb. I mean, we're all going to be sick. I know the broadcast talked about this a lot, but CeeDee having not just one, but multiple drops. And I know Chris Collinsworth, I think he did a great job of trying to paint the picture of how difficult that catch was on 4th and 3. Obviously, the catch that he didn't make. You got to make that catch. That's just really what it kind of comes down to. You have to make that catch. You have to make that catch. Something, and this is, worth examining, and we're 1 game into a 17-game season at this point in time. I did think to myself, as Chris Collinsworth was kind of discussing when the Cowboys were lining up to go for it on 4th and 3, I thought, man, this would make sense to kind of go for it, obviously go for it, but for Dak Prescott to go for it, for Dak Prescott to run, for Dak Prescott to be mobile. Mike McCarthy, obviously former Cowboys head coach, was on the Pat McAfee show earlier on Thursday, and he had something interesting to say. He noted that when Dak Prescott got his first big extension with the team, which was back in 2021, that the team was cognizant of that with regards to running Dak Prescott. And by that, I mean in not running Dak Prescott. So you do wonder if the Cowboys are just being a little bit safe, and you understand that on some level. But that 4th and 3, I'd be lying to you if I didn't have flashbacks, speaking of McCarthy, to Des Bryant's catch. It's 4th and 3. And while I think the ball was great, and I think that CeeDee should have made the catch, I do also kind of wonder, like, what are you doing, just airing it all the way downfield on 4th and 3? Like, move the chains, get a first down, live to fight another play. The read was there. CeeDee was open. So logically and from a process standpoint, I don't fault Dak Prescott for that at all. But I mean, man, it's just, and I think that those are the things that are going to stick with us. And it sucks that we have to wait so long for the Cowboys to play a game, because it was there. They would have had it. And had they gotten this win, had they won this game, I think we all would have felt a different sense of, man, things are possible this season. Man, they really could do it. And those things can still be true, right? And I think that that's the positive takeaway. A lot of the Bleacher Report comments are fighting and bickering about whether or not Dak Prescott outplayed Jalen Hurts. I thought Jalen Hurts was awesome tonight. Now, you can define that how you want. I recognize that Jalen Hurts is not the prototypical NFL passer, but Jalen Hurts made the plays that the Eagles needed him to make and had a lot of critical chain moving plays, obviously had a lot of critical rushing attempts and whatnot. I think that Jalen Hurts was exceptional for what his team needed him to be this particular game, and that's kind of been his MO. I know that we quibble with that because it looks different than greatness in other ways. I don't mean to make this about Jalen Hurts, but I think he played a fine game. Like, I don't think any Eagles fan is feeling bad about Jalen Hurts. But I mean, we're not here to really assess him, obviously. That being said, man, it is just such a bummer because the Cowboys are right there, and I think we still can take away, and I think that's why that 2021 Tampa game is a good comp. Because man, again, we'd be levitating right now, right? Like we would be floating, we would be on cloud nine. We'd be saying, man, they went there, they beat the world champs, and everybody, doubted them and whatnot. And they should still hold all of those feelings. And I don't know, I guess I do know the Miles Sanders fumble was because I think we all thought, man, they're going downfield and they're definitely going to score. And I think, the Sanders fumble came right after the Jake Ferguson non-catch that drew the Reed Blankenship penalty. I said it online in the moment, and I'll say it again right now. I did not think that was a penalty on Reed Blankenship. I think that was just a bang thing. I think he was just caught in the moment. I don't think it was malicious from Reed Blankenship. That's my own, personal assessment of the situation. But the irony of that, because Miles Sanders fumbled right after, and so it did kind of feel like a ball don't lie sort of situation. But the irony is that Reed Blankenship penalty came on third down. Had that Reed Blankenship penalty not been called, and had it just been fourth down for the Cowboys right before the lightning delay, obviously, they would have kicked the field goal. And I know the Cowboys lost this game 24-20, and that's only 3 more points. But had the Cowboys been trailing 24-23 on any of those final 3 offensive possessions, I do think that it changes significantly what their approach is, because all they need is a field goal. They don't need a touchdown. So in a very, very weird way, I know that we're looking at the Miles Sanders fumble as the clear-cut moment that changed this game, and it obviously is. But if we really kind of, peel the layers on the onion back, the true, flap of the butterfly's wings was that penalty being called against Reed Blankenship and it benefiting the Cowboys in that moment, because if not for that, the Cowboys would have had 3 more points, obviously, because we know now that Miles Sanders fumbled, and who knows what would have happened after that. On Bleacher Report, your boy Blake says the last throw wasn't the best in terms of position, but come on, CD, you're considered top 5 wide receiver. You got to catch it. And I agree with that. I mean, I am in no way disagreeing with that. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, if you are ranking the people in terms of who to blame for this game, who to fault, number 1 is absolutely CD Lamb. And that's tough, right? Because I think if I had asked you Thursday morning, what are the things you trust the most about the Cowboys? If I asked you to rank them 1 through 5, I imagine CD would have been 1 or 2, right? And CD was having an awesome game. Like, I think, again, I don't think it's far-fetched to say or suggest or just declare that the weather delay significantly took some steam out of the overall operation of the game at large, not just the Cowboys, not just the Eagles. And that really kind of, took it out of CD. I mean, he was a very different player in the second half, and notably a very different player in the aftermath of that particular moment. And so, even though the delay was like an hour. So, CD Lamb just kind of, it's unfair, I think, to place anything ever at the feet of one player. But if you're going to, in this specific case, I think it is CD Lamb. But I do think that the offense as a whole failed, because when the Cowboys defense got that first stop, and we're talking about the 3 straight stops they obviously generated against the Eagles, I think we all thought, holy crap, it's a miracle. And this, again, to be like, fully contextual here, Cowboys and Eagles come out of the delay. Eagles have the ball because it's coming right off the Miles Sanders fumble. Cowboys force a stop. And we're all thinking like, oh my gosh, they did it. And the pressure that I think we all felt for them to score was severe, was massive, was, dude, you better score right now, because we have no idea if you're going to be able to stop these guys at all across the rest of the game, because to that point in the game, they hadn't been able to. Lo and behold, they're able to do it a second time after not scoring. Oh my gosh, you've just gotten a second rub of the rabbit's foot. You really have to capitalize right here, because you just got back-to-back stops against this Eagles offense. There's no way you're going to get a third. And then amazingly, shout out to James Houston, they get a third. And so that's why I think it is fair to blame the entire offense. It is fair to say that they all failed. Again, it's fair to say that within that, CD Lamb had the biggest and brightest failures. And it's fair to give him the biggest chunk of the responsibility pie. Shout out Steven Jones, obviously. But my point is simply that we don't need to give 100% of it to one single person. The Cowboys offense failed with a chance to go win the game, not once, not twice, but 3 straight drives. That is something that falls on more than just CeeDee Lamb dropping some balls that he shouldn't have dropped, but that's my point in a larger sense. Ray says on YouTube, Eagles fans were scared and worried until CeeDee bailed them out. I agree with that. Flowman says Dak was throwing dimes. The dimes that CeeDee Lamb dropped, I'm totally with you in that sense. D-Day 2 notes, Philadelphia only had 50 yards in the second half. We haven't discussed this, and I don't know that it merits any kind of discussion here because I don't know that any of us have any like different opinion from one another, but I mean, like, we can't not mention Jalen Carter spitting. That was wild. I've been watching Dallas Cowboys football for a long time. I've been covering Dallas Cowboys football for a long time. And I would like to say that this is something I've never seen before. But if you're an older person or if you have been watching for a while like I have, I remember Terrell Owens spitting in D'Angelo Hall's face and nothing happening right before Christmas now 19 years ago. That was December of 2006 when the Cowboys went to Atlanta. So not saying this is that, but looking in a vacuum, this was crazy. I mean, this was wild. And that it happened so soon, that it happened so early. You can miss me with anything about Dak spat first or whatever. I obviously recognize he spat first. We all recognize that. But my only point is like using that as some sort of justification for spitting in a person's face or on a person is ridiculous and is the like biggest of all possible reaches. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how that is something like, I mean, I've never played in the NFL, but I can't imagine that anything would ever compel me to say, you know what I must do now is spit on that person. I simply cannot understand that. Shane says that was the craziest thing I think I've ever seen in a football game. The only thing that comes close for me is Baker planting the flag at Ohio State. But even that was like after the game. I mean, you know what I mean? Like this was this was really absurd, and that it was their best defensive player. It was just a really insane thing that, I mean, you couldn't have ever in a million years predicted that was going to happen exactly the way it happened and when it happened. And again, fine, Dak spit on the floor, on the ground, whatever. I can understand being maybe upset about that and taking it the wrong way, even though it's obviously a pretty innocuous thing. But the like tit for tat being like, oh, well, you spat on the ground, so like clearly you deserve for me to spit on you is like, again, just an enormous leap for me that I can't make logically in my mind. Caleb asks or says Carter has to get a suspension for that. I don't know. I'm making sure I'm not missing any quotes or anything from anybody, but I mean, that will be interesting to see. The Eagles play the Chiefs next week, and so you never know how that's ultimately going to shake out. Toxic Sooner, speaking of Baker's flag planting day, says 2-quarter Cowboys. They either start fast like tonight and flame out in the second half, or they boat race in the first half and then rack up stats in garbage time. I don't know what kind of label I would put on this Cowboys team. I agree with S Master Flash on the Bleacher Report side of the stream. Says great job coming out strong. We haven't seen that in years. This was, and I recognize what this sounds like when we're talking about a loss here, but this was a lot of fight from the Cowboys, and that's why I think that and believe that Brian Schottenheimer deserves an enormous amount of credit. I mean, this Cowboys team has been through it. I mean, this Cowboys team has had a lot said about them, and they really played like it. I mean, this was a team that played pissed off and a team that played like, man, we have just had to eat all of this, and we have not had any avenue to do anything with it. And we finally have a football game. We can finally prove to you that we're not all these things. And we finally have a chance to just let our play do the talking. And I think they absolutely did that. If I have any level of cope in the aftermath of this game, it's probably that if the weather delay doesn't happen, I think the Cowboys win. That's my cope. I think that's my cope, because I think the Cowboys offense would have kept their kind of flame going. I think that the delay just, and I think that's represented by Philadelphia cooling off so much. I think the Cowboys defense was really coming along, really finding itself, obviously, because even though they didn't stop the Eagles offense before the weather delay in the second half specifically, they did limit the Eagles offense to a field goal. Like at that moment in time, prior to the weather delay, the Cowboys defense had still just had their best possession of the night. And then the Miles Sanders fumble happened. So I really think if the weather delay doesn't happen, I think Dak stays fully in his form. I think CeeDee maybe doesn't get into his rut. I think the defense finds its way, gets a stop, gives the Cowboys offense another chance. And my ultimate point is I don't think there's any way the Cowboys offense goes 3 straight possessions in the second half without scoring any points if not for the weather delay. That just took an enormous amount of wind out of their sails, and it's very difficult to kind of recapture that flow, recapture that moment. And if I have to, again, cope in any sort of way, it's that. Spencer, thank you for the super chat on the tube of you. It says, RJ, or how about that, RJ? RJ back on our screens. It's a good day. It'll be a great season. Your biggest fans in Arkansas, the Brandon boys. Thank you very much, Brandon boys. I hope you enjoyed watching the game together. I hope everybody enjoyed watching it. It was frustrating, and it wasn't a win. But I do think that I think it puts some fires out, right? Like, Skylar says on YouTube, I'm okay with this game. Wish we won, but I'm okay. I think that if we look at the Cowboys as a house that was on fire before the game started, and I think that that's kind of fair, just given, well, like, everything. But if they were a house on fire, I think that this game put a lot of it out, right? Maybe there's still a few embers. There's clearly a lot of work to do. There's maintenance, but we're at the point where, like, the sun has now risen and we can assess the damage. The house still stands. There are clearly strong bones here, and there's something to work with. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of renovation. We're going to have some people chip in, some people help out. We're going to have some uncomfortable days, and we're going to have to do whatever. But like, we put out the most dangerous part of the problem. And I think that this game was that. The Cowboys entered this game, and it's an insane thing to say about a team in week one, but they entered this game on life support, right? Just because of everything. And it's not just the Micah trade. It's the lack of extensions. I know they did Deron Bland. I know they did Hunter Lipke, but you get my point. Like, the vibes have been bad for a while. And obviously an enormous part of that was the Micah situation. So you could argue that maybe trading Micah alleviated some of that, whatever. I'm not here to relitigate the Micah Parsons trade or anything, really related to it. I'm just here to kind of contextualize the situation with it, because it was such a big part of who this team has been since they arrived in training camp and the preseason and on and on and on. But so that being said, this game proved that they're not going to be some joke. They're not going to be some pushover. They're not going to be some whatever. This game proved, I think, that, man, they really are a legit squad. They really are a team that's going to win some games. Yeah, they need some work, and you can certainly make an argument like, oh, man, they could really use a player like Micah Parsons. You could take that low-hanging fruit, but this team showed a lot of gumption and a lot of fight, and that sounds like a moral win, and it's not, and we've coped ourselves into larger, hypotheticals and whatnot, but this is definitely a playoff caliber team in my mind. Thank you, Steel Hero 68 on on YouTube for the super chat. Says Shadi has shown brotherhood and culture. That's my thing, man. Like, this is this is a group that went to battle and came back, and yeah, they're nicked up and they've got some scars, and they may have technically lost this battle, but they're still standing, right? Like, they withstood the charge. Maybe they're actually a group that was attacked, right? Like, the city of Troy fell, but they're like some sort of city that, withstood a would-be takeover. They fought them off, and yeah, they have to rebuild. They have to, put these things back together and figure out a better plan for the next time, but they stood tall. And there's a lot to be said about that. And I think that, again, Brian Schottenheimer deserves an enormous amount of credit. Matt Eberflus deserves an enormous amount of credit. So many defensive players, that defensive front, deserve an enormous amount of credit. I think Trayvon Diggs deserves an enormous amount of credit. The fact that he even played in this game. I think that George Pickens deserves his flowers as well. I think had some impressive catches. I think we would have liked to have seen him involved more. I think it was not CeeDee Lamb's best game. I think Dak Prescott had some moments that I would have loved to have seen things be a little bit better, because, again, I can't sit here in full honesty and say, man, you know what, you did enough as an offense, because you scored no points in the second half. You had three, and some of that was the Miles Sanders fumble, some of that was CeeDee's drops, but you did not score a single point in the second half. That has to fall on the quarterback to some level. All right, we can still be big Dak Prescott fans and say this, I promise. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Says the run defense looked great in the second half, as well as the pass rush. CeeDee makes a catch, we win the game. Guyton also looked great. Now build on this. That's the thing. Like, they build on this, and everything is positive. Everything is nice, right? Like, we'll look back on this and say, hey, you know what? It was a learning experience. It was a moment that you built off of. It was a moment that everything became better as a result of. That would be nice. That would be preferred, obviously. And I don't think there's any real, like, and this was what I said before the game. What I said was, the Cowboys were in a no-lose situation, because if they won the game, obviously everything would have been amazing. But like is anybody, and I'm saying this seriously here, and there will be, the silly people or whatever, but is anybody looking at the Cowboys and saying like, oh, what a bunch of losers, what a bunch of whatever, is like, same old Cowboys, whatever. Like, I don't think anybody's being that way about them. I think people are saying, you know what, they have this to fix, they have this to correct, they should touch on this, they should touch on that, etc., XYZ. but I don't think anybody's mocking them or making fun of them. Yeah, sure. Again, you can take the low-hanging fruit and say that, Micah would have made a difference, and this is not a dig at Micah in any way. And I'll post this to the group that's here live. Hambone, by the way, thank you for the super chat. Says Kyrie Elam is a liability just like he was in Buffalo. Thank you for the super chat. I think it's too early to make that distinction, although gave up the Jahan Dotson play. That was tough. But let's see, my YouTube link broke. I think we're okay on YouTube. I hope we're fine. Yeah, we're okay on YouTube, just making sure. But I'll ask the group right now as we kind of sort through our emotions all together. Do you and again, let's be fair here, nobody be overly emotional, but do you think that Micah Parsons makes a difference in this game? And my answer is no, not in a Micah Parsons doesn't make a difference way, because I think he's an amazing player and I would have rather the Cowboys not traded him. But I don't think that, and it sounds ridiculous to say because look, the Cowboys didn't really get after Jalen Hurts specifically. Yes, they stifled things in the second half. Yes, they mitigated, obviously, a lot of what the Eagles were doing offensively. Some of that I'm willing to attribute to the weather delay, like I said. But I mean, that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know that, Micah, changes this result. Maybe he makes the defense, generate another stop. I think that this is a great answer from D-Day2 on YouTube. Says, does Micah play wide receiver, running back? The defense did enough to win. That's ultimately kind of how I feel. And I think that maybe that's the biggest, sign of positivity or sign of, positive juice, is that the Cowboys defense is not going to be some pushover. And I think that it was always silly to think that in the aftermath of the trade. I say always like it's been forever. It's only been a week, but the Cowboys defense is clearly going to be okay, right? Like maybe they won't, and maybe they will be, but maybe they won't be the best defense in the NFL, but they will definitely, absolutely be enough to win. They will absolutely be a group that is solid enough, as exemplified by Thursday night, a group that is very capable of generating 3 straight stops to get you the ball with a chance to go take over and get a win, put yourself in the lead. Maybe something else happens, whatever. But they were that group. They were exactly who the Cowboys needed them to be tonight. And I give them an enormous amount of props for that. So this isn't to say, oh man, the trade was awesome or anything like that. But I think that there's very clearly not necessarily going to be massive egg on the Cowboys' face. And look, Micah could have 10 sacks when the Packers visit the Cowboys, and it will look really stupid that night in particular. That goes without saying. But ultimately, I think that the point is understood that the biggest problem on the Cowboys right now is not having Micah Parsons. That is an issue, to be clear, but it is not the biggest problem on the team, at least in the aftermath of the loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's see here. Shane says the Eagles were always pretty good at taking Parsons out of the game. I think this game is still a loss if he played. Yeah, I think that's maybe the best way to put it, is that the Cowboys still lose. Let's see here. Jay's Wish 23 on Bleacher Report says Parsons would have gotten 2 sacks for sure. It's possible. I like what Janie says on YouTube. Says, I'm proud of the team. I am too. And we can pick at things and we can say CD had these drops and whatnot, but I'm definitely proud. And I think we're all probably more excited about the team right now than we were before Thursday. So, and that's, again, it's a win. It's a loss. The Cowboys are 0-1. But it's, last year, I had a lot of people in my mentions all day on Thursday saying I haven't been this unexcited for a season opener in a long time. And my response was always, are you sure? Like, did you not watch last year? Last year was exhaustion from week to week to week to week to week. And the Cowboys won their season opener last year at Cleveland, and it was a momentary distraction. And then the wheels fell off against New Orleans and Baltimore, and everything was terrible. This feels like the exact opposite of that. And not saying like, oh, watch out, they won the Super Bowl. But this feels like okay, you didn't get the win, but you clearly have a lot to work with. You clearly have some things. Like, you are clearly going to win, more football games than you don't. And you didn't win this one, but you showed a lot. You're exciting and you didn't embarrass yourselves. It wasn't silly. It wasn't anything. And so I think we can all take that and be really happy about it. I agree with Omar on YouTube. Says Kenny Clark made a difference in the game. That was really exciting. And sure, respect, justification, absolutely, to involving Kenny Clark in the trade for the Cowboys. So, okay, it's past midnight because of the crazy weather delay. I can't believe that it happened again to the Cowboys when they were in Pennsylvania, but, I guess it's a tradition at this point in time. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out, even though it's late. I'll have my winners and losers video available on Friday, probably around lunchtime, up on the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel. So make sure you like the video, subscribe if you're over there, tell a friend. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so. I'm on X, Instagram, and Threads at RJ Ochoa, and TikTok, RJ.Ochoa. The Cowboys are 0-1, but it's going to be okay. We'll make it through together. I promise you. We'll hug, we'll hold hands, and we'll carry on. I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday and a great Friday and a great weekend. Football is back, and I'm grateful to experience it out with you. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. We will see you next time.